December 15th, 1967, Point Pleasant, West Virginia. 5 o'clock in the evening. Christmas shopping season is in full swing, and the Silver Bridge over the Ohio River is packed with holiday traffic. Cars inch forward in both directions. Families returning home with gifts, workers finishing their shifts. The bridge connects Point Pleasant, West Virginia, to Gallipolis, Ohio. It has stood for 40 years. Thousands cross it every day without a second thought. And then, in less than 1 minute, the entire structure collapses. 31 vehicles plunge 70 feet into the freezing Ohio River. The water temperature is 44 degrees Fahrenheit. 46 people lose their lives. Some drown, some are crushed. Some are trapped in submerged cars and never escape. Bodies are recovered weeks later, miles downstream. But here's what most people don't know. The bridge collapsed because of a single crack, 1/10 of an inch wide, in one piece of metal out of thousands. The bridge had zero redundancy. One failure meant total catastrophic collapse. And in the weeks before the disaster, dozens of witnesses in Point Pleasant reported seeing something strange, a creature, 10 feet tall, with glowing red eyes and massive wings. They called it the Mothman. Some believe it was a warning. Others call it mass hysteria. But the sightings stopped after the bridge fell. This is the story of the Silver Bridge collapse, the tiny flaw that killed 46 people, and the mystery that still haunts Point Pleasant today.
The Silver Bridge opened on May 19, 1928. It was a suspension bridge, but not like the Golden Gate or Brooklyn Bridge. This was an I-bar chain suspension bridge, a unique design. Instead of cables made from thousands of wire strands, the Silver Bridge used I-bar chains. These are solid steel bars with circular holes or eyes at each end. The bars link together like a giant chain. The entire weight of the bridge hung from these chains. The bridge was built by the American Bridge Company. It cost $1.2 million. At the time, it was considered an engineering marvel. The main span stretched 700 feet across the Ohio River. The towers rose 100 feet above the water. The bridge deck was 2 lanes wide, narrow by modern standards, but adequate for 1928 traffic. Point Pleasant desperately needed this bridge. Before it was built, the only way to cross the Ohio River was by ferry. Slow, unreliable, especially in winter when ice clogged the river. The bridge transformed the local economy. It connected West Virginia coal mines to Ohio markets. It made travel easier for families on both sides of the river. For nearly 40 years, the Silver Bridge was a lifeline. But the I-bar chain design had a critical weakness: no redundancy. In a traditional cable suspension bridge, if one wire breaks, thousands of others still hold the load. The bridge stays up. But in an I-bar chain, every link is essential. If one I-bar fails, the entire chain fails. And if the chain fails, the bridge falls. The designers knew this, but they trusted the steel. They believed the I-bars were strong enough. They were wrong. By the 1960s, the bridge was showing its age. Paint was peeling, rust was visible. Traffic had increased far beyond what the designers anticipated in 1928. In 1941, the bridge carried about 3,000 vehicles per day. By 1967, that number had more than doubled. Heavy coal trucks rumbled across daily. The bridge was not designed for this kind of load, but inspections continued to give it a passing grade. On the surface, everything looked fine. Beneath the surface, a crack was growing.
The original construction of the Silver Bridge in 1927 and 28 was a major undertaking for the region. Workers assembled the I-bar chains link by link, piece by piece. Each I-bar was forged from heat-treated carbon steel. The process was precise. The steel had to be strong, but not brittle. Too much carbon, and it would snap. Too little, and it would bend under stress. The I-bars were manufactured off-site and transported to Point Pleasant by rail. Workers hoisted them into position using cranes and scaffolding. The chains were assembled on the riverbanks first, then raised into place. The entire process took over a year. The bridge towers were built from riveted steel. The deck was supported by suspender ropes hanging from the I-bar chains. Every piece had to fit perfectly. The bridge opened with great fanfare. Local newspapers called it a triumph of modern engineering. Politicians gave speeches. Crowds gathered to watch the first cars cross. For Point Pleasant, it was a symbol of progress, a connection to the wider world. No one imagined that the design itself contained a fatal flaw. The I-bar at position C13 North was forged in 1927. It was installed near the top of the I-bar chain on the Ohio side of the bridge. It looked identical to hundreds of other I-bars, but inside the metal, a tiny imperfection existed, a microscopic flaw in the steel. It might have been introduced during the forging process or during heat treatment. No one knows for certain. The flaw was too small to detect with the inspection technology of the time. For 40 years, that I-bar carried its share of the load. Cars crossed above it. Trucks rumbled past. Seasons changed. The steel expanded in summer heat, contracted in winter cold, and slowly the microscopic flaw grew. Stress concentrated at the defect. Metal fatigue set in. The crack lengthened, 1/100th of an inch, then 1/10th of an inch, still invisible to the naked eye, still hidden beneath layers of paint. By December 1967, the crack had weakened the eye-bar enough that it could no longer support the load. The bridge was living on borrowed time, and no one knew.
In November 1966, something strange began happening in Point Pleasant. People started reporting sightings of a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. It stood over 6 feet tall. Some said 10 feet. It had massive wings and glowing red eyes that pierced through the darkness. Witnesses described a sense of overwhelming dread when they saw it. The local newspaper called it the Mothman. On November 15, 1966, 2 young couples were driving near an abandoned World War II munitions plant outside Point Pleasant. They saw a large figure standing near the road. As they drove closer, it spread enormous wings and took flight. They said it followed their car at speeds over 100 miles per hour. They were terrified. They reported the sighting to police. The story made the front page. More sightings followed. A construction worker saw the creature near the Silver Bridge. A pilot reported seeing something massive and winged flying alongside his plane. Dozens of people came forward with similar stories. Some were dismissed as hoaxes, but many witnesses were credible. Business owners, teachers, police officers. They had nothing to gain by making up stories, and they all described the same thing. Red eyes, wings, a feeling of impending disaster. The sightings continued throughout 1967. Then, on December 15th, they stopped because the Silver Bridge collapsed. At exactly 5:04 p.m., rush hour traffic crawled across the bridge. Witnesses on both sides of the river reported hearing a loud crack, like a gunshot. Then the entire bridge shuddered. The center span sagged, and then it fell. The north tower twisted and collapsed. The deck broke apart. Cars tumbled into the water. Screams filled the air. The entire collapse took less than a minute. Harold Bundy was driving his pickup truck across the bridge when it gave way. He felt the deck drop beneath him. He slammed on the brakes. His truck tilted forward. He saw cars ahead of him disappear into the river. Somehow, his truck came to rest on a piece of wreckage that had not fully submerged. He climbed out, jumped into the icy water, swam to shore. He was one of the lucky ones.
Charlene Wood was in her car with her 2 children. The bridge collapsed beneath them. The car filled with water. She managed to get one window open. She pushed her children out first. Then she tried to escape, but her leg was trapped. She drowned. Her children survived. James Byram was driving a truck loaded with Christmas gifts. His vehicle plunged into the river. He was never seen alive again. His body was recovered 3 weeks later, 8 miles downstream. Rescue efforts began immediately. Divers plunged into the freezing river, but visibility was almost zero. The current was strong. Many victims were still trapped in their cars. The water temperature made survival nearly impossible. Hypothermia set in within minutes. Of the 46 people who perished, most drowned. Some were crushed by falling debris. A few were never found. The National Transportation Safety Board launched an investigation. They recovered pieces of the collapsed bridge from the river. They examined every eye-bar, and they found it. Eye-bar C13 North, fractured. The crack started at a tiny corrosion pit on the inside surface of the eye-bar eye. The pit was caused by stress corrosion, a chemical reaction between the steel and the environment. The crack grew from there, slowly, over years, maybe decades, until the eye-bar could no longer hold the load. The investigation revealed something even more disturbing. The bridge had zero redundancy. When eye-bar C13 North failed, the chain broke. When the chain broke, the North Tower lost support. When the tower collapsed, the entire bridge fell. One failure, total collapse. This design flaw was known, but it was considered acceptable in 1928. By 1967, engineering standards had changed, but the Silver Bridge had not been retrofitted. It was a disaster waiting to happen. And then there was the Mothman. Investigators found no connection between the sightings and the collapse, but the timing was impossible to ignore. Sightings began 13 months before the bridge fell. They stopped the day of the collapse. Some researchers believe the Mothman was a supernatural warning. Others think it was mass hysteria fueled by anxiety about the aging bridge. The truth has never been determined.
There was no completion for the Silver Bridge, only catastrophic failure. But the aftermath brought sweeping changes. Within weeks of the collapse, Congress passed the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1968. The law mandated that every bridge on federal highways be inspected every 2 years. Thousands of bridges across America were examined. Hundreds were found to be structurally deficient. Many were closed. Some were demolished. Others were reinforced. The eye-bar chain suspension design was effectively banned for new construction. Engineers recognized the fatal flaw. No redundancy meant no margin for error. Modern suspension bridges use cables made from thousands of wire strands. If one strand breaks, the others compensate. The bridge stays up. The Silver Bridge taught America that lesson the hard way. A replacement bridge was built immediately. The Silver Memorial Bridge opened in 1969, just 2 years after the disaster. It used a cantilever truss design, much stronger, much safer, and it includes a memorial plaque listing the names of the 46 people who lost their lives when the original bridge collapsed. The victims were mostly local residents, workers heading home, families doing Christmas shopping. They had no idea they were crossing a bridge on the edge of failure. Harold Bundy, who survived, said later that he heard strange noises on the bridge for weeks before the collapse. Creaking, groaning. He thought it was just normal bridge sounds. He was wrong. Those sounds were the bridge crying out, warning anyone who would listen, but no one understood until it was too late. Lawsuits followed the disaster. Families of the victims sued the state of West Virginia, the American Bridge Company, the inspection agencies. Settlements were reached, but no amount of money could bring back the lost. No settlement could erase the trauma. Point Pleasant became known for two things: the bridge collapse and the Mothman. The town embraced both. A Mothman statue was erected in the center of Point Pleasant. The Mothman Museum opened. An annual Mothman Festival attracts thousands of visitors. Some come for the paranormal mystery. Others come to remember the bridge disaster. The two stories are forever linked.
The Silver Bridge collapse changed how America inspects and maintains infrastructure. Before 1968, bridge inspections were inconsistent. Some states inspected regularly, others did not. There were no federal standards, no oversight. The Silver Bridge disaster proved that approach was inadequate. Bridges were failing. People were losing their lives. Something had to change. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1968 created the National Bridge Inspection Standards. Every bridge carrying federal highway traffic must be inspected at least once every 2 years. Inspectors look for cracks, corrosion, structural deficiencies. Bridges are rated on a scale. Those rated as structurally deficient receive more frequent inspections. Some are closed until repairs are made. The law has saved countless lives. But the law also exposed an uncomfortable truth. Thousands of bridges across America are aging, underfunded, structurally deficient. As of 2023, over 45,000 bridges in the United States are rated as structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. That's roughly 7% of all bridges. They are not necessarily unsafe, but they require monitoring, repairs, and eventually replacement. The cost is staggering, hundreds of billions of dollars, and the funding is not always there.
The Silver Bridge also left a psychological scar on Point Pleasant. Survivors still struggle with trauma. Harold Bundy, who escaped the collapse, said he could never drive across a bridge without anxiety. He would grip the steering wheel, hold his breath, wait for the deck to drop. The sound of metal creaking would send him into a panic. He carried that fear for the rest of his life. The Mothman legend continues to grow. Books have been written, documentaries filmed. A Hollywood movie, The Mothman Prophecies, was released in 2002. It dramatized the sightings and the bridge collapse. The film brought international attention to Point Pleasant. Tourists flock to the town. They visit the Mothman Museum. They take photos with the statue.
They walk to the site where the Silver Bridge once stood. A small park now occupies the spot. Plaques tell the story, but the river still flows beneath. Cold, dark, unforgiving. Some believe the Mothman was a harbinger, a supernatural entity that appears before disasters. Others think it was a misidentified bird, a sandhill crane perhaps, with red eyes reflecting light, wings spread wide, seen in the dark by frightened witnesses. The debate continues, but no one has proven either theory. What is not debatable is this: the Silver Bridge collapsed because of a design flaw and a tiny crack. 46 people lost their lives, and America learned that infrastructure requires constant vigilance, inspection, maintenance, investment. The bridges we drive across every day are only as safe as the systems we have in place to monitor them. The Silver Bridge is a reminder of what happens when those systems fail.
The Silver Bridge collapse remains one of the deadliest bridge failures in American history. 46 lives lost because a microscopic crack grew undetected in a single piece of steel. A design with zero redundancy meant that one failure brought down the entire structure. And the Mothman sightings that preceded the disaster have never been fully explained. Paranormal warning or mass hysteria, the legend endures. But the legacy of the Silver Bridge is not just tragedy. It is also reform. The Federal Aid Highway Act of 1968 transformed bridge safety in America. Inspections became mandatory. Standards were created. Thousands of deficient bridges were identified and repaired. Lives were saved. The Silver Bridge taught America a painful but necessary lesson. Infrastructure must be maintained, inspections must be thorough, and redundancy must be built into critical systems. Point Pleasant has not forgotten. The town honors the 46 victims. The Mothman statue stands as a reminder of the mystery, and the Silver Memorial Bridge carries safely across the Ohio River, a testament to the engineering lessons learned from disaster. If you want to uncover more stories of American infrastructure hiding dark secrets, subscribe to Hidden America. Next time, we'll explore the Fort Peck Dam landslide in Montana, where a massive section of an earth dam collapsed during construction, burying workers and halting one of the most ambitious New Deal projects. We'll investigate the engineering miscalculations, the human cost, and why the disaster was nearly forgotten by history. Subscribe now for more hidden infrastructure stories. And remember, the bridges you cross every day are only as safe as the inspections we perform. The Silver Bridge proved that, and 46 people paid the price.